Good morning. This is Pat O'Connell calling to order the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission's regular open meeting on Wednesday, June 21st, 2023. So with us this morning is Michael Smith from Office of General Counsel. So Michael, could you call the roll?
Commissioner Aguilera.
Present.
Commissioner Ellis.
Present.
Commissioner O'Connell.
Here.
We have 3 commissioners present, constitutes a quorum.
Thank you. So next item is Pledge of Allegiance and the state pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Salute the flag of the state of New Mexico, the symbol of perfect friendship among the United States. Thank you. So we're going to go into a discussion on consideration and approval of the agenda. There's quite a few items that we're going to remove from the agenda, but start with commissioners. Are there any items you want to move from the consent agenda to the regular action agenda, or any changes other than removing Mr. Fisk's items?
I have no additional changes other than removing Mr. Fisk's items.
Okay, so I move that we proceed with the agenda that is posted with consent action item, utility matters 1, 2, and 6, and regular action item A1 removed or yeah.
I second.
Yeah, thank you. I was hoping you were checking that I did that right.
I think, yeah, I think you said consent utility matters, right? 1, 2, 6, and then regular action item 1.
Right. Okay. Been moved and seconded. Can you call the vote, please?
Commissioner Aguilera.
Aye.
Commissioner Ellison.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Connell.
Aye.
The agenda as amended is approved by vote of 3-0.
So new section on the agenda, since you've been ably steering us through these meetings, Michael, is announcements, kind of couple opportunities there. Do you know of anything that's going on that might interrupt the meeting? And then the other, just going forward, talking to Jordan about this morning. I think this is a good opportunity to do things like highlight public comment sessions and public hearings that are coming up, like you did last week, Commissioner, for the session we had Friday afternoon. So first, ask Michael if you've got any announcements to make, and then see if any of the commissioners have something they want to highlight coming up.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I do not.
Thank you.
I don't either at this time.
I don't have anything either.
Great, thank you. And we'll start noting them as we move forward. But again, this is an opportunity if something comes up for you to highlight anything you think the public should know about. All right, next section on the agenda is public comment. Patrick, do we have any public commenters?
Mr. Chair, I did not receive any requests for public comment, and I'm not aware of anyone in the hearing room who wishes to give public comment.
I'll just double check. Is anyone here that would wish to make public comment? All right, so no public comment this morning. So the next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. As listed on the agenda, we have cases in section A, transportation matters, listed as number items 1 and 2, 3, 4, and 5. Oh, I'm sorry. On the transportation agenda, there's 2 items, 1 and 2. And on consent utility matters, there's 2 items, 3, 4, and 5. Commissioners, do you have any discussion on the consent action items?
Nothing from me.
I do not.
Me neither. So I guess I will move that we approve the actions in the consent action items that remain on the agenda.
I second.
Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Aguilera,
Aye.
Commissioner Ellison,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Connell.
Aye,
The consent action items are approved by a vote of 3-0.
thank you. Yeah, and Commissioner Aguilera and I were joking that our meeting 2 weeks ago was a record fast one, and because of the absence of Commissioner Ellison, but that wasn't true. So we're about to find out if we break our old record, and I kind of doubt it, so. All right, the next item on the agenda was discussion and potential action. This is something that's lots of people have been working on for a while, and I really appreciate the efforts. I'm gonna turn it over to Commissioner Aguilera, if that's okay, to lead us through that discussion.
Thank you, Chairman. So yes, I want to raise the long-awaited discussion of the commission's open meeting frequency and potentially vote on whether to move to a bi-weekly open meeting frequency. So I was looking at the definition of bi-weekly because it seems like it could also mean twice a month. So just to be clear, I'm talking about every 2 weeks or every fortnight. That was a joke. So I requested an evaluation of the appropriate frequency for this commission's open meetings and to add structure and improve our internal procedures so that commissioners are as prepared as possible to decide the important issues that affect the industries we regulate, stakeholders, and everyday New Mexicans. And I and others had expressed some concerns with our existing weekly Wednesday meeting schedule. Among some of the problems are that commissioners are allowed limited time to study and assess the complex matters that we decide in proposed orders, and have a diminished opportunity to consult with our advisory staff on those orders. Another concern is that commissioners suggested revisions to orders must be made between the posting of the agenda and the open meeting, which does not allow for a lot of time for a single commissioner to provide feedback and have that feedback reflected in the order, let alone 3 commissioners providing their feedback and having that reflected as well. Also, the existing process could be more efficient, and it does not allow our advisory staff the time they need to prepare the memos and orders, and in addition, the existing process does not give them enough time to reflect our viewpoints in the orders. Another concern is that the present weekly open meetings absorb the time of a lot of commission staff, and with uncertain returns. Business meetings might be more productive if the framework embraced efficiencies in process and analysis ahead of open meetings, and we can streamline the open meetings with improved processes and clear expectations. So for me, it boils down to the current process needs more structure and accountability and more time with any given issue. It does not provide me the time that I feel I need to make decisions in the best interest of New Mexicans. So I think that having open meetings every 2 weeks will improve our internal procedures and afford our advisory staff and the commissioners more time to dedicate to each individual issue. So, sort of slowing down the process a little bit. So under the instruction of our chief of staff, advisory staff evaluated the open meeting practices in other jurisdictions and considered the obligations that we have in statutes and in our rules to determine when the commission should hold its regular open meetings. So I want to thank Choya and also all the staff who participated and provided input. One thing that is very important to me is to listen to everybody's input and not impose a process on them. And so thank you to all who participated. I think it's very important so that we can get the most buy-in as possible. And even if one of your ideas did not make it through, I hope that you feel that we at least properly considered them. So staff evaluated the open meeting practices employed by commissions in Colorado, Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming, which meet weekly. They also considered the open meeting practices employed by the commissions in California, Nevada, Michigan, Oregon, Pennsylvania, and Washington, which meet bi-weekly. Arizona and New York, which hold monthly meetings, and the Hawaii PUC, which does not have open meetings, as the Hawaii PUC is permitted to deliberate and vote in closed sessions with the requirement that the minutes record the vote. Staff also considered the industries that these commissions regulate to compare them to the industries that we regulate, and the time and day of the week that they meet, their processes leading up to the open meeting. Several state commissions also hold regular closed executive sessions leading up to the open meeting. So staff's memo included, which you have received, included several pros and cons of meeting weekly, bi-weekly, and monthly. And I'm only going to speak about those related to meeting bi-weekly because that's what the memo recommends, and that is also what I am recommending. Among the pros are that it gives commissioners more time to study recommendations and perform the necessary work to hold meaningful and efficient open meetings. It gives our advisory staff time to provide more comprehensive briefings to the commissioners. It provides time for additional closed sessions for deliberations and briefings from advisory staff if needed. It provides the commission and staff time to focus on items that are not driven by the open meeting. But there are also some cons associated with moving to a bi-weekly schedule. So due to the time between meetings, the agenda of a bi-weekly meeting will contain more matters to decide on, which will result in more cases to evaluate for a single open meeting. For us and for staff as well. If the open meeting format is not designed to achieve efficiencies, meetings might run longer, which would partly defeat the purpose of switching. So I think ensuring that we adopt and employ a more efficient process. I sort of see this as necessary in order to make sure that moving to a bi-weekly schedule would work. Another con is that canceling a meeting or failing to have a quorum could result in delays in hearing matters and could produce deadline emergencies. There might also be a need for more special open meetings to address matters with quick turnaround deadlines prescribed in statute or in the commission's rules. We do have several types of filings with short turnaround deadlines, and this list was also provided to you in the memo. And there might also be some deadlines in commission rules that could potentially be changed to accommodate meeting every 2 weeks. So Regarding closed deliberative sessions for covered Open Meetings Act matters, various models exist to consider. Some commissions set aside a specific day for items associated with the upcoming open meeting, and some do it upon the request of a commissioner or staff. And finally, this open meeting policy is, so I want to clarify that I think this is the start of the structure I believe the commission needs, but there is more work to do. We still need to reevaluate our policies for single signature orders, reconsider which deadlines in commission rules can be changed to give staff more time for analysis, how we can improve our memos to provide the information that the commissioners need to make a decision, how we can improve our templates for orders, and to establish a process to attach dissents and concurrences to commission orders so that our decisions are properly reflected in the record, in the written record, and not, an archive on YouTube. So there is a lot of work to do. And for me, the goal is to offer consistency and predictability. For most proceedings, the public should have a pretty good sense of how we're going to rule. I think for me, that means that we are making decisions based on the law and based on precedent. And that's what this process is about for me. I think at this point, I'll probably stop and, turn it over to see what reactions you have, or whether, what your thoughts are.
I'll go ahead and start and then turn it over to Commissioner Ellison. First of all, like you said, I appreciate all the thoughtfulness and the work that went into the preparation of this memo. Was very thorough and helps provide context for a discussion we're having today. The thing I drilled into upon having read the memo was the list of things that might have to happen more frequently. So lots of good examples provided. Many of them are just 30 days or, when clocks get started, when utilities file things. So my observation on that is the utilities are here. They come to all of our meetings. They pay attention to our calendar as closely as we do. So I expect when we set this cadence and provide that transparency of this is when the meetings are going to be, they're going to adjust their filings to fit within those windows. So that might not be true universally, but when I dug into this list of things to worry about, I thought, well, that's not one that we have to worry about, probably. Then another item was some of these we may be looking at using single signature orders to address timing issues. One of the things MacLee is helping me with is he's going, just kind of looking at the history of single signature orders from this commission, looking at our rules about when they apply. And so just coming up with real world examples for what the rule means. So hopefully a bright line will emerge where this is when single signature orders should be used. This is when they shouldn't. So in addition to this effort, we've got that effort going on. So anyway, between those two things is providing a calendar and transparency about the meeting and being more comfortable and confident about when single signature orders are appropriate, when they're not, to me, resolved the biggest question I had coming out of looking at this memo. So just wanted to share that as part of our discussion and then turn it over to Commissioner Ellison.
Great, thank you. I certainly appreciate this this effort, Commissioner Aguilera and Ms. Curry. I remember one of our initial meetings here, the question came up about whether we should continue with the practice of regular weekly meetings. And my first impression was, well, why not? It seems to work. But I'm very glad that Commissioner Aguilera questioned whether that might be, the best idea and delved into it, because I am convinced that we should give it a try. I see a lot of advantages to having more time to consider matters, and actually being able to edit orders and get feedback from the other commissioners, to have time to actually write a dissent if I think that's where it's going, or to write something in agreement that may have a different slant on things. And I think we do have a lot of excess churn right now due to that weekly schedule that we could eliminate. I also think that it's an important decision, but it's not a irreversible decision. I think we can adopt it and try it, and I think it's going to work out, but we always have the option of changing it if we don't feel it's working. So I'd be very much in favor of that. I also wanted to call attention to a matter that's addressed at the end of this memo, and that I briefly brought up last week, and that is having regular deliberative sessions, closed deliberative sessions in between the bi-weekly meetings. As is pointed out here, that's what's done in Colorado, California, Pennsylvania. I'm fairly sure that Oregon also does that. And I guess it addresses one negative feature of going to the bi-weekly meetings, which is less communication between commissioners. So if we were to have that scheduled deliberative session in between the open sessions, we would remedy that problem. I do want to point out that clearly these closed deliberative sessions on adjudicatory matters are allowed in the Open Meetings Act. They are considered, and that provision allowing them is for a reason, and that is because the quality of decisions can be improved when the commission is able to discuss things, get opinions from their attorneys, and not be on a stage and feel a little more comfortable with saying whatever comes into their mind. I am committed to transparency, and I'm sure that is true of my commissioner colleagues. Every decision that we make, every adjudicatory decision, has got to be in an open meeting, and I'm committed to explaining my rationale behind my vote. So that is my strong opinion, that the quality of our decisions, of my decisions, would be improved by having that ability to deliberate in between closed meetings. And I would strongly suggest our deciding on having a regular day for those deliberations.
So do you think, well, we don't have a motion yet, but do you think that should be included in a motion establishing a day that could be used for those meetings? I mean, certainly the meetings will have to be noticed, and if there isn't an agenda, then they won't happen, but do you think that it'd be valuable to set that date when we proceed with this recommendation?
That's a good question. I suppose it could be done, just as a matter of course, that we could just announce such a meeting every other week as a matter of practice. But I also think it would be fine to make that, part of this, accepted new procedure. So I'd be interested in your thoughts and in Commissioner Aguilera's thoughts about, whether, it might make sense to go ahead and make that a formal part of this procedure.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Why I was asking the question is I see what I think maybe we're going to do here is commit to meetings we're going to have. And so that I think is very valuable in transparency. And then what I'm exploring with you is this a commitment or a practice that will follow as needed? And then, to the point of this memo, it might be more often than not, but I don't know. And since I'm not sure we are committing to do a closed meeting every other week, that's why I have a distinction between those two ideas.
Yeah, I guess I would lean towards committing to have the open meeting every other, I mean, the deliberative session in between open meetings, and then canceling it as needed to, I guess, kind of really put in place that, this is something that, we want to do as a regular part of conducting business. And if, there's nothing for us to discuss on the adjudicated cases, then we cancel it. I'd be surprised if there's nothing to discuss, but, that option would always be there.
To hear your thoughts.
I guess I could see this working in various ways. When I think about having like a regular closed deliberative session that is associated with the items on the open meeting, I'm thinking about how I'm going to prepare for that meeting. So I think then I'm going to, like, when I need the information, so that I can read it and then be ready for that meeting. So I think that is certainly a consideration for me, and a consideration for our advisory staff, who will need to prepare the memos a little earlier. I like the idea of a regular meeting and then canceling it if it is not needed. I guess for me, structure is really what I'm looking for. In terms of, I do want to address one thing that Commissioner Ellison discussed, which is transparency. The Open Meetings Act requires us to vote in a public meeting. And that's fine. I think for me, the value is not really to know who voted which way, but the value is to explain why I voted that way. And a deliberative session is going to allow me to gather my thoughts and learn from your questions or your points, and if I disagree with them, prepared to rebut them in a dissent. But I think just as a matter of becoming more structured, I think, and for my learning and for my being able to explain why I'm voting in a certain way, written down in the record, I think that a closed deliberative session that is scheduled associated with the open meeting, I think that would be helpful. And yeah, so.
Question I have is, what day in this, we've got a 2 months worth of Gantt chart cycle that is in our package. Is there a day in that cycle, 2-week cycle, that you think works? Because I mean, I appreciate your point, Commissioner Aguilera, about wanting to prepare for all of my meetings. And this was a 2-week cycle that you're busy for 2 weeks. You're not necessarily, the commissioners are busy, but the organization is busy for 2 weeks. So, and with the goal being efficiency, when's the best time to put that meeting in there? And if you've thought through that too.
Well, I mean, it's not a matter I've thought about a lot, but one thought would be, if we're going to have the open meetings on Thursdays, to also have the deliberative sessions on Thursdays of the week in between. And I certainly wouldn't want to defeat the purpose of going to the bi-weekly sessions by making everyone prepare or feel like they have to be completely prepared for that deliberative session, because we aren't voting and we're just discussing, and it could be a time when we're all briefed at the same time instead of individual briefs. So I would say the standard for preparation for a deliberative session like that is a lot lower than for an open meeting. But again, I haven't studied it in detail.
Yeah, just thinking through that while you were discussing it, just the workflow that we're looking at, and who knows if this is how it'll really play out, but that block, you start on a Monday with agenda item requests from the organization. Then you start drafting preliminary agenda based on those requests, gets circulated on Tuesdays. Then there's kind of a 3-day window where people are perfecting their agenda items, making sure they're going to be able to get the materials and available. Those type of activities are what I'm seeing happening there. That window kind of runs through Tuesday through Thursday. So then actually, if Thursday is the day that we talk about these things, then that's actually kind of a nice time, because by then ideas will have been developed enough at least to be on the preliminary agenda, can get them framed up. And then agenda goal or deadline there would be keep that Friday afternoon, even though I think since the meeting's on Thursday, we might be able to post an agenda on Monday, but I still agree with the idea of trying to post the agenda as soon as possible. So anyway, it just kind of fits into that slot, I think. And then following, that Thursday activity, then you've got this conversation with commissioners conferring with advisors all the way from Thursday through to the open meeting. So to your point, listening to what people think the issues are and then having some time to confer with advisors about it and then discussing what we do and what we decide to do on Thursday just kind of feels like something that works.
Yeah, I think that would work as well. I mean, there are a lot of sort of internal procedures, that are not public facing that I'm thinking about that maybe I don't need to, raise here. It's probably better that I raise it with our advisory staff because I want to make sure that this, works for them. But I think that generally makes sense to me. I'm also thinking about which, how we choose which items to place on the notice of a closed deliberative session. And I imagine that would be based on what our advisory staff thinks we should, they feel they want to brief us on, or if there is a specific request by a commissioner. I don't think it needs to be, everything. Yeah, I think that would work. I left my Gantt chart in my office, so I don't.
Yeah, the team put together.
Yeah. Yeah, so anyway, I think that can work.
Would Friday be a better day for that deliberative session? Would it give us a little more time to put that agenda together?
I think Thursday makes the more sense. I'm just sort of thinking about, the attorney and other advisory staff who has to work on the order. I mean, if it were me, I probably would want to put forward a memo with, the options that I think are viable and hear the commissioner's deliberations and then go back and then write the order based on what I think the majority is going to rule on. For instance, so I think having it on Thursday instead of Friday would give them more time to work on that order.
And then just kind of a practical concern on Thursday versus Friday, definitely not a basis for a decision, but something that I thought about when we were working through this is just trying to make sure that our meetings were scheduled around the known unknowns. So, the timing that's in the memo means we're going to avoid NARUC conferences with our open meetings. Those tend to be, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, break up on Wednesday. On the other end of the stick, you've got the CREPC meetings, which I think we need to participate in. Those are at the back end of the week. So just Friday ends up being a day that gets kind of, for me anyway, booked up with meetings and availabilities for other folks. So Thursday feels like a better internal day and leave Friday open for external items.
And I also wanted to discuss the details about when to start. And subject to checking with staff, I think we could probably have our weekly meeting next week, and then skip what would be, I think, the July 6th meeting, which is a Wednesday, and then essentially start this new cadence on Thursday, July 13th. The next one would be on Thursday, July 27, August 10, August 24. And the start date is flexible, but my understanding is that staff looked at sort of when upcoming NARU conferences and other conferences are happening, and so starting on July 13 or July 27, and sort of that cadence makes the most sense.
Okay, so appreciate as always the discussion. Anything else that you don't want to leave on the table, and or else I'd ask Commissioner Aguilera to make a motion.
The other detail that was in the recommendation is to start the meetings at 10 a.m., which, I mean, instead of 9:30, which is fine with me. I don't know if you have any reaction to that.
Gives me another half hour to drink coffee.
Okay, so just thinking through the details, I think what the motion that I'll make is with respect to our meeting cadence, and we still have our open meeting policy resolution, which would need to reflect this. I don't envision that we would need to vote on that resolution if we're voting right now on what to change in that resolution. But maybe we can bring that back later if our attorneys think that we do need to do that. So I move to change our regular open meeting schedule so that the commission will hold its regular open meetings bi-weekly on Thursdays beginning at 10 a.m.
Yeah, so I guess this goes back to the discussion we were having. Do we want to formally set aside the alternate Thursday for potential deliberative sessions? Or we could make that a separate motion, just asking for discussion on how you design that motion.
Okay, so I'll add to my motion to also have closed deliberative sessions normally the Thursday before the open meeting for any cases that are associated with the open meeting, and anything else covered under the Open Meetings Act that staff would like to add to the agenda for a closed executive session.
Thank you. Any discussion on the motion before? So I'll go ahead and second the motion. And again, don't want to foreclose any discussion on the motion. Now, just, I guess one caveat I will add is I do acknowledge that we will be posting a notice and agenda for every meeting, whether it's open or closed. Well, any further discussion? Mr. Smith, I think we're ready for a vote.
Commissioner Aguilera,
Aye.
Commissioner Ellison,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Connell.
Aye.
The motion passes, voted 3-0.
Thank you. And then again, thank you, Commissioner, for leading that work. And then I think one of the things will be interesting following this meeting is working with our advisor to see if we need to revise our open meeting policy, which based on the changes we made today. So. Okay, so Next time on the agenda is an item that I put on the agenda, and frankly, the item wasn't very well described in board effects, so I apologize for that. So I will start with just an overview of the genesis of it, and then what it is that I think we might be able to accomplish. I can get to board effect. So each of us are slowly but surely building a portfolio of work that we're handling on behalf of the commission in New Mexico. That work includes things like being on committees or other assignments, areas of focus based on our respective experience and just things the commission needs to get done and needs to get done expeditiously. So one thing that came up just recently is Commissioner Aguilera and I are on this MOU group with states that have clean energy goals. And in the course of that work, one of the commissioners from Colorado had seen a communication that NARUC had sent to Congress about transmission and transmission plan. And for the West, it felt like that communication didn't fit what needs to happen out West. And then frankly, I mean, just background on that, if you look at studies and maps, the needed transmission build out for low cost, reliable, clean energy looks a little different in WEC than it does in other regions. So maybe emphasis on transmission legislation and rules might be different for us than it is in the rest of the country. So this letter that we were provided and asked to sign basically just says the West is different, which that's an easy thing to agree with. And transmission probably needs to be built. That's also an easy thing to agree with. But Commissioner Aguilera and I were sitting here with this letter knowing we can't decide to act on that committee because that would constitute a quorum. And but on the other hand, the letter needs to go out and it'll be a stronger letter if it includes a New Mexican signature on it. So idea broadly was let's delegate authority from the three of us to one of us on topics. So then we each have the authority and freedom to act, especially if we're going to go to every 2-week open meeting, where we can do things like sign letters that should be non-controversial and but need a New Mexican voice on them. So that's the item on here, transmission policy. So the idea is first discuss whether this idea has merit, and then delegate one of the three of us to have the authority just to sign things like letters to NARUC about transmission policy. And then took that idea and I expanded it to things we've already discussed in an open meeting, and that was that Commissioner Aguilera would like to take the lead on broadband policy. We're heading into the summer of interim sessions in the legislature. So I think it would be efficient and valuable to the commission if we just make a formal recognition that he's leading our charge on that. So he feels free to talk to legislators and interim committee and on behalf of the commission without feeling like he needs to get a vote from the commission as a whole to make a decision. And just one of the things I want to also emphasize in this description of what it is I would like to discuss is this doesn't mean that we're not going to disclose what we have done, have discussions about it. It's what I could see with the example of this letter being somebody signed it, next open meeting, discussion with commissioners, we say, hey, I signed this letter and this is what it meant and what it did. This is why I chose to sign it. So don't want to foreclose transparency on that, but just wanted to make that point. Okay, so possible other delegation of authority would be broadband policy. Again, we've talked about that before. Next one is, again, because we're heading into a summer of interim committees, commission needs to be able to have good discussions with stakeholders about our budget. It would be helpful to delegate authority on budget topics to one of the three of us. So I think those are the three things that we can discuss and potentially vote on today because it's on the agenda. I also think that if this tool makes sense to the three commissioners, encourage you to put other items on the agenda for next week so that we can flesh that list out a little bit. So anywhere where you're feeling like, gee, New Mexico needs to be participating in this, but don't want to have everything we do limited by the cycle of an open meeting and a vote, please delegate to me the authority to speak for this body on that topic, knowing that we're going to come back and have a discussion or disclosure of anything that happened afterwards. So that's my speech on that. Just turn it open for questions, discussion, any reactions. And again, apologies. I think I caught everybody flat-footed this morning with that because other than it was on the agenda, I didn't get my stuff into board effect soon enough.
I am supportive of this approach. At some point, I think we're going to have to exercise some judgment and, there might be times where I'm not sure where either of you would land on a particular letter or subject. And in those instances, I think it would be helpful to have a conversation at an open meeting to just affirm that it's okay. But I do think there are some, I also understand your proposal here as being a decision or communication or signing on as an individual commissioner as opposed to as an entire commission. For example, this letter that you referenced to NARUC, I imagine if you or I signed it, Chair, that it would just have your individual signature as opposed to Chair Pat O'Connell on behalf of the New Mexico Commission. But I think is that also how you're understanding it?
Yeah, I sorry for the analogy, but it allows us to fly a little bit without a net. But I know just personally, I'm pretty cautious about those kind of things. So, but yeah, it'll rely on, first of all, representing ourselves as this is my opinion. I've been delegated the authority to have this opinion. Just making sure everybody knows it's subject to review, I would guess, from the commission if we ever do individually go beyond what the three of us would choose. So that's why I also wanted to bring up, it's important that we are transparent and share with each other what we do under this limited delegation of authority.
Yeah. Yeah, because on the one hand, I do feel like I should be able to sign on to a letter as an individual commissioner because I support it. On the other hand, things that I sign on to might reflect, someone might infer that it represents the commission as a whole. So I think having this conversation is definitely a good one to have.
Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts, Commissioner.
Well, be honest, I have been pretty consumed this week with the SPS rate case, and this is something that I really haven't been able to give thought to. So personally, I would prefer, if we're going to take a vote, I would prefer a vote next week as opposed to right now. You know, I understand the desire to get some more efficiency and you know, potentially as we go to the 2-week meeting cycle, you know, to get things done in between those meetings. I'm a little concerned about what, you know, we're implying if, you know, when we delegate authority, you know, clearly that person could not represent that, you know, the commission has voted in favor of my position, or you know, so I think we'd have to think about what it is that, you know, that we're, you know, exactly the authority that we're delegating and what can be represented. You know, to, on one hand, to say a commissioner can write to NARUC on a particular topic, you know, that seems hard to argue with, but I think they could do that now. You know, an individual commissioner could write NARUC now and say, my opinion is XYZ on this topic, and that would be fine. But if we want to, you know, imply whole commission support for something, you know, I think we'd have to discuss it. I mean, for example, this letter, you know, I really don't have a problem with the idea of, you know, expanding the national dialogue on transmission reform. I mean, it's kind of hard to argue with that. But, you know, it's kind of hard to say what a future letter might have in it. And if it had something that I really objected to, and the representation is that the commission is supportive of it, I just don't know. I guess I want a little more time to think about it is all I'm asking. I don't want to say yes or no right now.
Well, I totally appreciate that. And just listening to you, I was thinking, oh, so you don't want me writing a letter saying, let's build a nuclear plant in Mr. Ellison's backyard. Yeah. So, and anyway, I didn't feel like today was a day we had to get a vote on this. So we've teed it up. You've raised some good things to think about. I think individually, I felt like I could have signed that letter to NARUC. Why this just sparked the thought was, I think individually I could have signed it. I think individually Commissioner Aguilera can sign it without having us do a vote or this discussion. But then it led me to think, gee, what about when things get more complicated? So, and that's exactly where I heard you land in the discussion is, let's be clear about what this limited delegation of authority does. So I'm happy to table voting on any of these delegations of authority to a future meeting. Now that the stuff is in board effect, if you want to redline it or whatever, we'll do a better job with the documentation for a future meeting. And then meanwhile, also, I think accomplish something that was important today, which is just glad to hear you thought that we individually could sign this letter, because I think that I'd already reached that for myself. So I think either I or Commissioner Aguilera will go ahead and sign it. Tell Commissioner Blank in Colorado that we're willing to sign the letter. But
Yeah, and I think Commissioner Ellison, you explained what I was trying to express more clearly. I agree with you. I think that if it comes down to something that the commission is signing on to as a whole, it's something that we should have a conversation about at an open meeting and decide that, as opposed to, you know, like this one. I also agree that as an individual commissioner, we could sign.
Yeah, so I guess this wasn't a definite action item on the agenda. It was discussion and potential action, so I don't think we need to table it. But what I would also do is encourage commissioners just to think along two things: is what, make sure that the motion that we would propose for a future meeting has appropriate discussion of the boundaries or of these delegations, and then also think about this list of things that need to be delegated, because really I think they're all things where in order to be relevant, we've got to be timely. So balance that against the appropriate limits of authority, and expand this list of topics. If you see something else that's a burning discussion out there that we got to be timely if we're going to be relevant, and go ahead and propose that for another. So I could see us having half a dozen of those or whatever after we figure that out. So okay, next agenda item is communications with Chief of Staff. Ms. Corey.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. I'm going to pick up where you left off, and that is to say, as you're considering this delegation of authority, the other useful thing will be as Mr. Gillespie and I start addressing the legislature and start having interim committees, start having to be out there on topics relevant to this commission. It will be helpful to know who is the point person for those relevant topics. So that's a not quite necessary delegation, but it would be helpful as we go into the session and the interim session to have those clear in our minds. Speaking of that, the interim session, things are gearing up. I think they're called work plans were put together over the last several weeks for the interim committees, and we've already had requests to appear at various ones. One on community solar and one for budget. That's not for a while yet, so we will discuss that more as it comes forward. Just so you have a sense of things that I will be tacking onto your calendars in the coming month or so. We have a meeting, and by we, I mean our budget team and I have a meeting scheduled with each of you individually to discuss FY24 budget. That's the budget that starts on July 1st. The other things that aren't on your calendars yet, but I will be requesting time on there is I want to provide you with a briefing on performance measures for FY25, because that's the first step in building the budget that will be wholly ours for the first time. So as we develop those, look at what's in there now and move forward, I want to make sure that you have an understanding of all that entails and how it helps and fits into the budget as we go forward. And once we have what we think will be our final performance measures for FY25, I will go ahead and present those to the commission as a whole. After that conversation, we will, again, we being the budget team, and I will meet with you to discuss what we're planning on requesting for FY25 and make sure that there's both understanding and input from each of you. And again, we will present that final request to you as a whole. That's not due until the fall, but as I foreshadowed several weeks ago, that is something that we are already talking about and hope to engage with you on shortly. I think that is the quick and dirty of it. So I stand for questions.
Appreciate the quick. Not so much the dirty. Any questions for Chief of Staff? Thank you for that presentation. Thank you. All right, next item agenda item is communication with commissioners. Yeah, this has been for me, just lots of prep for the rate case hearing that's going on this week and this meeting and spend some time with my family over the weekend. So anyway, I don't have anything that we haven't already discussed in this meeting to share. So I'll turn it over to Commissioner Ellison.
Thank you. A few items. We're planning on having the second reliability workshop on July the 6th. I wanted to confer with you about the time of that. The Lawrence Berkeley person has a preference for a morning session on July the 6th. I just wanted to get your feedback as to whether you had a preference or a calendar conflict in terms of morning or afternoon.
Well, we just cleared our morning for July 6th, so I would say personally, I prefer morning.
Great, thank you.
Hold on, I think Commissioner, there's looking at his calendar.
Yeah, no, that. Yeah, July 6th, that's a Thursday. Yeah, I think that works for me as well. There is something on my calendar, I think, actually, that with the chief of staff, but
Maybe
it would have to be
after this meeting, because I am seeing a hold for strategic plan and board development. So we'll talk about that after the meeting and try to so we'll hold off on that decision. Also, I would like to propose a deliberative session on this SPS rate case. I think, we're all getting into it with these hearings, and I personally would value a session where we can exchange some thoughts about that rate case, and I wanted to see if you agreed with that, and if we could schedule that for some time.
No, I had a similar thought. I thought it would be a deliberative session will likely be helpful on that. And then in terms of scheduling it, I mean, we're having the hearing right now. I would like the dust to settle on the hearing a bit before that meeting happens. So that would be after transcript, maybe after briefing. So anyway, other than agreeing that I think that's wise, that we expect that to happen, probably be a week or, well, have to let hearing examiner Hurst conclude the hearing and set the schedule for what comes next before I have an opinion on when's the best time to do that.
Okay, that's fine. It may be premature then to set a date, but I do think that we would benefit from having one. one other thing that comes to mind, and I guess, this rate case sort of emphasized to me how important it is to have on the commission side some research staff. We do have these 2 open positions, and with this rate case, I found myself wanting to talk to folks about certain aspects of rate design and accounting and ROE calculation, and realized I don't know who I can talk to because I can't talk with the PRC people who are parties to that case, and so I'm not proposing a specific action, but I do want to say that this just emphasizes to me how important it is to have some research staff on the commission side, and that I do think having a strong economist or utility accountant and an engineer who is understands power engineering, understands some of the issues around inverters and distribution systems. I think it would be a real resource for us.
Yeah, so I guess. I agree with you, but second of all, that feels like, we've hired a lot of folks over the last 6 months, and frankly, I'm real happy with who we've been able to hire, but do you think we'll just need to repost those jobs or change the emphasis of the posting, or just got more clarity on what you want to see when the applicants come in?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe we should think about more of an outreach to universities and that sort of thing. Perhaps Ms. Curry has some thoughts on that that we can discuss now or later.
Mr. Chair.
If you got any thoughts,
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioner. I think what I would recommend based on this conversation and the last one I think you all had is I would recommend that we retool the postings to be very specific into the areas that we're looking for, because previously those postings were kind of amorphous, like if you have interest, apply type thing. And I think what I'm hearing is we're looking for an engineer and an accountant or an economist. And if that's the case, then we should post specifically for that. The other thing that I'm hearing, and please tell me if I'm hearing it incorrectly, is we could target graduate students who could work at the same time they're going to school. Is that right?
Well, that's a good question. I guess in my view, we sometimes have had some strict requirements around, number of years of experience, and that sort of thing. And, I think we could relax those for the right candidate. What's wrong with getting a sharp recent, PhD grad in economics or engineering that, doesn't have, 5 years of working experience. So I think we need to be a little more flexible on some of the terms, but you know, I guess I would like someone who can work full-time for the position.
That's helpful. We will adjust.
Yeah, and just wanted to note that I am also supportive of having a less broad posting so that we can target more specific and attract more specific experience.
That's your list, Commissioner.
That's it.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioner Aguilera.
No, I'm good. I don't have anything additional.
Objections to adjourning? We are adjourned.